Please welcome to the stage creative producer Arielle Rassel.
What's on your mind? How many times have you been asked that question and it was clear the person didn't really care about the answer, right? Or maybe wasn't even listening. It's just what we say, right? How many times have you asked it without really meaning it? My name's Arielle. I'm a producer. My pronouns are also she, her. And like Neha, I'm a SCAD grad, so nice to see some familiar faces. This has been a really fun full circle moment. My first job in the industry was here in Seattle, so it's great to be back on the stage here in Seattle with you guys today. One of the things as a producer that I am deeply, deeply passionate about is building successful teams and helping companies create and promote environments that lay the groundwork for those teams to be at their best. Many of you know me from my role as Next Gen Chair. In that role, I spent a lot of time talking to young professionals, emerging talent, and the companies that hire them. And one thing became abundantly clear. We as an industry have a crisis of culture. And I don't mean beanbags and ping pong tables, margarita trucks, and beer on tap. Those things are great, but they're perks. They're not culture. They cannot replace a healthy culture. In fact, when they do, they really just become lipstick on a fundamentally ugly pig. Folks across the spectrum of our professional ladder are burnt out, they're overwhelmed, and they're frustrated. Feelings that can be exacerbated by a toxic company culture are mitigated with a strong one. To create that, we need a handful of things: trust, psychological safety, vulnerability, courage, and above all, compassion. Those things together make up a culture of coaching. Today and tomorrow, you're going to hear from me a handful of times. You might be sick of me by the end of this. That's fine. We're going to talk about several factors that contribute to a coaching culture, but let's start with one that I think fundamentally underlies all of the rest: asking the right questions. Namely, that first one: what's on your mind? So let's start with a story. We've got Sally and John. Sally's John's manager. It's time for their weekly check-in. We've all been there. It gets rote. You've got your 20 minutes. You've spent 15 minutes making small talk, and how was your weekend? How are the kids? That's great, you're bonding, right? There's a time and place for that. But all of a sudden, you've got 5 minutes left. Sally has another meeting to run to, and John still has a list of questions. He leaves feeling frustrated and without answers. We've all been there, we've all had that experience. So let's rewrite it. Instead, Sally opens their check-in with, what's on your mind? It's direct, yet it's open-ended, and it gives John the autonomy to steer the conversation himself. So John can say, well, I'm really having challenges with this particular aspect of Project X. Now, Sally hears this, and the next thing that's tempting is for the advice monster to kick in, right? Everyone wants to go, I can fix it, right? That's helpful. Don't. To reference Hamilton and Aaron Burr, talk less, ask more. I'm not saying never give advice. There's a time and a place for advice, but we jump to it too quickly. A study by Howard Beckman and Richard Frankel found that the average time for a doctor to interrupt to advise is 18 seconds. 18 seconds, that's not even half a minute, right? But the point of coaching is to help your player learn how to find the answer themselves. You can't bat for them. Help them learn to field the curveballs. We'll be talking more about psychological safety and vulnerability in some of the sessions I'll come back for later. But this all underlies that. Asking questions plays into all of it. You need to learn to call your players forward, empower them. Empowerment leads to further growth and greater investment in the organization. And research has shown that empowered employees are more productive and engaged, more accountable, more responsible. They're better committed to the organization. They're overall more happy in their jobs. That's just good for business. It helps your bottom line. Leaders who empower their teams are also significantly more likely to be trusted, and we'll talk more about trust later as well. One of my favorite pieces of research that's come out of employee empowerment lately is that the people we would least expect to see growth out of empowerment from is the ones who are least experienced, the ones who are most tempted to guide and shape and steer and give the least amount of empowerment to. They're the most likely to improve in performance when they're empowered to make their own decisions. So let's talk about how asking more questions and quelling that advice monster empowers your people. We've covered question number 1, what's on your mind? Here's a few more to keep the conversation going. A really easy follow-up question to what's on your mind is, and what else? Odds are we all have that first issue that comes to mind, right? It's the surface issue, it's the one you think you're struggling with. But it's probably just the first issue, or it might not even be the real one. It's covering up deeper challenges. To lead on that, your next question can be, what's the real challenge here? Which forces them to break down that issue into more addressable chunks. We've all struggled with that issue that all of a sudden it's the popcorn problem, right? One kernel pops and all of a sudden you've got a bag full. So what's the real challenge? Helps you dig into what's that first addressable challenge that can make this feel more accomplishable, that can help empower your employee to move forward and solve that problem on their own. Asking "and what else" gets them to dig into the challenge and discover. Again, we're on that empowerment thing, right? It's good, keep going. One of my favorite questions that's simple and obvious and yet I feel doesn't get asked enough is, how can I help? Management, leadership, your goal is to help with things, right? You can't unilaterally solve problems for them. Asking how can I help is a direct, open way for them to say, I need help with this specific thing. It's not nebulous. It takes an indirect problem, it focuses it in. You don't solve the problem for them. It's just, how can I help? How can I coach? Really, what this all boils down to is keep asking questions. Dig a little deeper, actively listen to the answers to those questions, and shut that advice monster down when it wants to jump up and go, I'll fix it, right? Not the answer. As George Bernard Shaw once said, the biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it's actually taken place. Over the next 2 days, I'll come back a couple more times to talk with you guys about other ways you can improve your culture with putting in implements of coaching and tools that'll help you build a positive and impactful team. Ask more questions, listen to the answers, and the positive changes may surprise you. Thank you.